Dear Jacob Boersma, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This Tuesday in the afternoon and in the evening we will have the Dutch Ethereum and Bitcoin meetup in Amsterdam.
Mhm.
In the afternoon we will start with the Ethereum and Bitcoin dinner at Hofje van Wijs, where you can pay with Bitcoins and you can buy Bitcoins. And in the beginning of the evening we'll walk to the Old Amsterdam Stock Exchange, the Beurs van Berlage, where Berlage Meet and Workspace is, and there we will have the meetup and the talks. And you will. I asked you to talk about the announcement of the FinCEN regulation of Bitcoin, the financial.
That's right. Yeah.
The financial. The U.S. government, the Financial Crimes
Financial
Enforcement
Crimes
Network.
Enforcement Network is the
Because
acronym. Yeah.
I know you have something more to tell about this. And,
Yes. Thank you. First of all, I'm glad that I will finally be able to make it to the Ethereum and Bitcoin meetup in Amsterdam because it's been on my to-do list and calendar for quite a long time. But very often work and other stuff has conspired to keep me from you guys. But I'm very enthusiastic to join you and to meet other like-minded people who are like me very enthusiastic about all the possibilities surrounding these cryptocurrencies. Yes, well, so you asked about the new FinCEN regulations or actually recommendations. It's already, of course, now about a month old, this news, because it came into the news in at the end of October. That FinCEN, which is the as I said, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in America, which is kind of the American equivalent of what we here in the Netherlands call the meldpunt ongebruikelijke transacties. So it's an organization which is tasked with everything surrounding anti-money laundering and prevention of terrorism financing, all these kinds of things. And until now, they had given guidance that basically some Bitcoin or a lot of Bitcoin companies were not subject to their regulation. As long as they're basically payment service providers, such as, for example, the services that BitPay provides, where all they do is collect bitcoins from customers and pay out web shops in basically in dollars or in euros. So they're just putting through money, and they're not themselves. The money is not transmitted as of itself, but as part of an online transaction, and that seemed to be a kind of an exemption, so that you would not be considered a money transmitter. But now recently, FinCEN, based on questions that were asked by a Bitcoin. A kind of similar Bitcoin payment service provider, they've now said no, that is in fact not the case. The exemption does not apply because the exemption only applies for payment service providers who transfer payments between regulated entities, such as banks. For example, a credit card company, they only move money from one bank account of the buyer to the bank account of the seller. But because in Bitcoin, at one side of the transaction, there is not a bank account but a Bitcoin wallet, the exemption doesn't apply.
And
that.
Yeah. And I guess
So
one
what
of
that
the.
basically means is,
Sorry.
Yeah, we're talking at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But what that basically means is that now a lot more Bitcoin companies than was previously thought
Mm-hmm.
now threaten to be required to fall under this money transmitter definition, and
Mm-hmm.
so will need to be licensed as a money transmitter. And that is kind of a mixed blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the one side, if you look at, for example, the European situation, and especially in countries like the Netherlands, Bitcoin companies are really looking for kind of a recognition by the regulator
Mm-hmm.
to at least say, well, okay, you are a licensable company, or we see you as some kind of payment service provider. So it at least gives clarity about the position. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, this regulation is not very easy to adhere to. So to get the money transmitter license requires quite a bit of effort, and it will also depend on which states you want to function in. So you have to take a look at that. So that it will also incur legal fees probably to really get everything worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, especially this is the case in the US, is that money transmitters are not very well, banks don't look very positively upon having money transmitters as their customers,
Mm-hmm.
because money transmitters are often seen as a kind of a bit of a shady business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so even though they are regulated, it doesn't guarantee that you will be able to get a bank account or to keep the bank account that you have already as a Bitcoin company.
Good.
So that's so that is in a nutshell basically the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, of course, a lot of nuances. Most importantly is that FinCEN says, well, yes, okay, if we have now made this determination for this specific Bitcoin transmitter organization,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't. They hasten to say that it doesn't actually mean that they want to apply this globally. So they actually ask Bitcoin companies who are in doubt to ask specifically for their own company whether or not this also applies. Yeah,
Because
so I think that's really a little bit of a cop out actually, because
mm-hmm.
yeah, that only makes it will take a lot longer now to really get a good picture, because
Mm-hmm.
they're going to, it seems like they're going to decide on a case by case basis. Um, so yeah, let's hope that they come back on that and basically give some more general guidelines.
Yeah, because at the moment these are recommendations. So in other words, they ask the public to uh, criticize it, and within some time, the recommendation becomes their directive or something, or is it
No,
already?
not quite. What you're thinking of there is, I think, the bit license, which is in the state of New York
Oh yeah.
currently under debate.
Mm-hmm.
FinCEN basically they have given guidance previously. That was over a year ago. That was in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of 2013. Actually, John Matonis spoke about that on our in our conference. So I quite remember quite well when that was that they issued that guidance.
Mm-hmm.
But they have now given a specific determination for a specific question that was asked, and mind you, that question was already also asked over a half year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they've taken their quite a long time to come to this determination, actually. But for this specific company, this is a binding decision. They haven't actually revealed what the exact company is that had asked this question, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a binding decision for them. And because they are a public organization, so they publish this decision, but
Mm-hmm.
anonymized as to which exact company it is. But the other thing that you are mentioning is the bit license, as it's called in the state of New York.
Mm-hmm.
There they are looking at, okay, how can we regulate Bitcoin and cryptocurrency companies in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a novel approach in that they ask companies and other interested parties to give their input also for this regulation. And there are now drafts for that regulation which which have been created basically with all stakeholders together. But there it still looks like that the definitive regulation will be quite strict, so it will be quite difficult to get such a bit license in New York. But the creator of this, or the person who's responsible for this licensing process, who's Ben Lawsky, he's actually talked about it at the Money 2020 conference beginning of this month in Las Vegas. And there he's announced that even though it looks like it's going to be quite a strict set of regulations, that there will be a kind of a lighter regime for existing companies to ease into it. So they will be able to keep doing their business and start kind of work their way into the full licensing deal.
Yeah, because I was wondering about the bit license. I mean, New York has a big financial services industry. Is this usual that they are so strict, or is it just because Bitcoin is new to them and they are afraid of it or something? Because I mean, you would expect from a state which is so used to doing financial business that they would somehow welcome it more.
Well, yes and no. On the one side, yes, you're right that probably New York business people will jump on any kind of opportunity to improve their own processes. On the other hand, of course, there's also a very strong lobby of traditional bankers, I suppose, in that area. Who will of course, be the first to say, well, this centralized model that we have, where you trust in a bank, is also has worked very well. So why do we want to change? But Ben Lawsky himself has actually also spoken about this. That actually some of the requirements that will be asked of Bitcoin companies will be quite strict, especially, for example, in how strong they need to do the security of their IT. But he's actually said about that, okay, yes, right now that means that you will need to be stricter in that than, for example, banks. But don't worry, this is just the first step. These same kinds of requirements will definitely also be coming towards banks, because cybercrime
because they want to be
is
stricter
in
in
general an increasing problem.
Okay.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Well, the idea is that of course in these kind of laws, they will need, you cannot discriminate against new parties, of course, but it's quite difficult to say what is strict or what is not. It's kind of a new category, of course, of player in this field, so it's quite new for everybody. These Bitcoin companies do not function in the same way as banks, in the sense that they do not have have all the infrastructure of the transactions is not inside a Bitcoin company, because they make use of the whole Bitcoin network. And so a lot of the stuff that is traditionally done by banks themselves is now done in a peer-to-peer network, and that is quite, of course, a new paradigm for a lot of people to get used to. But at the same time, a lot of things, like for how do you do know your customer requirements, how do you make sure that the dollar payments that are done are kept safe. How do you make sure your accounts aren't hacked and that your customer data remains safe? Those kinds of things are, of course, applicable basically to any company.
But I mean, don't they consider the fact that I mean, in a lot of countries they have, as far as I know, the policy that new upcoming developments should be treated flexibly,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all new and you don't want to scare off new developments. And as long as it is a very marginal phenomenon, it doesn't really matter if something goes wrong, because it's still, I mean, the whole Bitcoin world is still very marginal compared to the whole rest of the financial
Yeah.
world. I mean, because it sounded to me that they, instead of being flexible, they were extremely, more than strict compared to banks. But like you already said that they will become stricter to banks also.
Yeah, that's one part of it, and
Mhm,
don't underestimate how strict banking requirements are.
mhm,
It's no cakewalk to become a bank.
mhm,
Let's put put that first.
mhm,
And the question is, would you at this point in time actually want to become a bank anywhere? Uh, Especially in most parts of Europe, and for a fact I know this in the Netherlands. If you would want to actually go for a full banking license, it's next to impossible, because the scrutiny on banks has increased enormously in the past years. Um, but still, of course, for the existing players,
mhm.
existing banks, of course, get a little bit of leeway in the sense that, yeah, they're of course established institutions, and they have
Mhm.
quite a long, track record of checking their customers and handling all these kinds of data. You can certainly argue about if they have a long track record of actually being trustworthy with money, especially based on the whole with the whole financial crisis.
Mhm.
But the man on the street still very much trusts his bank,
Yeah.
uh, and
So,
of course.
yeah, sorry.
So for Bitcoin companies, they because they're not still very small on the most part, they
Mhm,
have a lot to prove that even though they are very small, they can mitigate all the kind of financial risks that are involved.
mhm.
Um, and of course, a lot of the financial risks in Bitcoin are mitigated by the fact that you have this network, which is quite robust, and
Yeah.
which allows for payments without chargeback and all those kinds of things.
Yeah,
But
you
that's
mean
still
that
something that needs to be explained to a lot of people.
yeah, you mean that the authorities, they they are now treating the Bitcoin companies as if it were traditional banks, but they don't realize that a lot of traditional risks in traditional banking are, solved is maybe too big to say, but are lower because of the nature of Bitcoin and the blockchain and such. I
Exactly,
mean,
exactly, and that will apply to some Bitcoin companies, but not to
mhm,
others.
mhm,
Um, and so it becomes in the past years it's been a lot about educating people in financial industry
mhm,
exactly what Bitcoin is. Now they're starting to get a little bit more to grips with that.
mhm,
Is my personal experience.
mhm.
So the next step is showing them the different players in this whole Bitcoin ecosystem. So a Bitcoin payment service provider, which only accepts Bitcoins and then sells them on an exchange and then pays merchants in dollars,
Mhm.
has a completely different risk model than an actual exchange, which keeps much more money and also bitcoins for much longer times, and thus is potentially much more vulnerable to, for example, for being hacked.
Yeah, you mean a Bitcoin exchange is more in like a traditional bank, while a Bitcoin to dollar or euro payment service provider,
It's
yeah,
more like a traditional payment service provider,
yeah,
like
and the risk
like
is
a
very
WorldPay or
small.
a Global Collect. Sorry?
And the risk is smaller because I mean they don't really keep a lot of money in their pockets, while an
Yeah,
exchange
yeah,
usually keeps a
and
lot of.
precisely. Now, and the risk with a traditional payment service provider is that if they deal mostly with credit cards, which is for the larger internet, especially internationally, is usually the way to pay online.
Mhm.
They have this whole chargeback risk, and fraud risk, which they need to mitigate. And that is, of course, if you deal with a guaranteed payment method such as
Mhm.
Bitcoin, you don't have that risk. There are no chargebacks in Bitcoin.
Yeah, you would
And
actually maybe you could build such a system using multisig.
absolutely, and then again the risk model shifts, because then you have
Yeah,
to look
yeah.
at, okay, but you can, first of all, of course, you can build it from the ground up, and it's still different from how a credit card company would operate it.
Yeah.
But you definitely need to look at, okay, does this also introduce new risks
Mhm.
that you can get some kind of collusion with multiple signatories to charge back even though the goods have been delivered, and
Mhm.
how do you handle that, and who has liability? It's very interesting. The interesting thing in general I found about Bitcoin is that a lot of things are solvable in the technology, but then
Mhm.
again, you also have to look at, okay, how is it used, and how does that involve all kinds of legal aspects,
Mhm.
and also business aspects. It's always a very large picture that you need to look at, but that makes it exciting, I think.
And I'm wondering, um, these rules apply to companies who somehow exchange Bitcoin to dollars or euros. But
Hmm.
um, if you are a company who only, for example, if you only accept Bitcoin and you don't exchange it to euros or dollars,
Hmm.
is it do those rules still apply because you
Um,
are not
that
dealing with euros or dollars?
Yeah, yeah, that kind of depends. It probably means that for the financial crimes enforcement, yeah, you are not considered a financial service company anymore, because
Mhm.
they don't consider bitcoins to be actual legal tender.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that you avoid all kinds of regulation altogether, because especially for the tax purposes, so for the IRS,
Mhm.
you would still need to take a look at what that means, because then I'm not exactly sure how the situation now is in the US, but I know that they have ruled there that any kind of Bitcoin transaction is considered to be taxable under capital gains tax. So
Mhm.
they don't consider it money; they consider it to be a capital good. So
You
if you
mean,
exchange it for something, if you buy something with it, then it's kind of a barter
yeah,
situation,
okay,
and
yeah.
you would still need to pay stuff like VAT.
But you don't have to pay it double like possibly in the Netherlands was the case.
No, right now in the US, it's more the case that you need to do a lot of bookkeeping,
Mhm.
because if you buy a Bitcoin and then it becomes more valuable, and then later you sell it again, then you need to take the difference in that value, and that can be taxed under the capital gains tax. So that makes it quite difficult, because you need to keep basically do a lot of bookkeeping about when exactly you bought your bitcoins and for what amount, and all those kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
So it kind of paying double VAT is of course also not really what you want, but yeah. Um, there are other countries where they've now said, okay, well, we consider Bitcoin a financial instrument, so it's not taxable. It's not taxed at all, the Bitcoin transactions themselves. So that also gives that gives the most freedom, of course. But in the Netherlands, the tax authority and the lawyers haven't quite really decided on everything yet.
Yeah,
there was last week there was a conference here in Amsterdam on that, and they. There they said, well, at least the tax authority, the Ministry of Finance said, well, at least let's hope that we don't go to the situation where we consider Bitcoins to be a service, because then every person who does Bitcoin transactions suddenly becomes a service company under the law, and suddenly has to be taxed as a company, and that would really create a lot of headaches. So whatever we do, we don't want to have Bitcoin be a service. We either want it to be something like money, or a good, or some kind of capital. But
isn't it most probable that in the end there would be some kind of rule which says that, if you're doing business like other payment service providers, then you are considering the fact that you are acting like them, then you should somehow apply to the same kind of laws. But if you are just, you are just a hobbyist, and you bought or sold some Bitcoin, then you're just a hobbyist. And isn't it most probable that in the end that it would be not the question if some transaction has been done with Bitcoin, but what is the nature of the transaction?
Yeah, true. Yeah, but that right now it's again it's kind of also because it's very much an unknown entity for a lot of regulators. It's very hard to grasp. I think we will go to some situation where it's you look at the scale of things, and just now and then doing a transaction with Bitcoin doesn't involve any kind of problems. But as soon as you are functioning as a kind of business, then you're also regulated as a business.
Yeah.
But going back to your earlier statement about that as well. Isn't Bitcoin right now way too small to get to deserve all this regulatory attention? I think in some way you're definitely right. It's definitely very small, and so all the regulatory attention definitely has a risk of kind of killing it in its infancy, basically. On the other hand, the fact that there is so much attention shows that a lot of people are actually very aware that it is a very important development. So it's in that sense, I think it's quite positive that there are so many regulators who actually think, hey, we need to think about this because it's not something that's marginal and that will go away. We need to be prepared for this. And I think a lot of people are also looking back at the beginning of the internet and slapping themselves for, if only we'd thought about copyright laws on the internet when the internet started, because now there's no way we can put the genie back in the bottle, basically. So maybe with Bitcoin we're now in time, and I think in typical overreaction they're now probably too early. But but it's probably better that these people are paying attention than that they wouldn't be paying attention at all.
But have you got any clue? I mean, those FinCEN rules, will they have? I mean, it's U.S. Government, but any clue if they will have indirect implications for Europe and the Netherlands? For example, does it mean that the BitPay with their office in Amsterdam has to be considered differently in the Netherlands? Are they now a foreign bank in Amsterdam, if you know what I mean?
No, there is no direct influence of these rules for the European situation, because the European situation is governed by basically the rules set by, for example, the European Central Bank and the European Payment Service Directives. There might be some indirect results because a lot of regulators all over the world are looking at each other and seeing what they are each for themselves doing. But I think we will have more clear picture when, for example, in Europe, the fourth anti-money laundering regulation becomes more clear what that will be like, because there's also some talk about getting things like cryptocurrencies more specifically into that kind of regulation. That will give more of a picture of what European Bitcoin companies or Bitcoin companies active in Europe will need to comply to.
Okay. I think we should leave it here. We covered it quite well, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have you got some last message or whatever to say?
Well, I would certainly invite everybody to also come to the Bitcoin meetup this Tuesday, of course. So that's that's my most important message, and the other message is to also again I'd like to reiterate that I think it's quite a positive step that regulators are talking with Bitcoin companies about how this regulation is going. So that they're not trying to, and the most important thing here is that we as people who know about Bitcoin have an important role to play to educate these people about what the differences are between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in regards to the regular financial system. Because I have found that a lot of education goes a long way in helping people understand and also stop fearing Bitcoin.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I invite the listeners to come this Tuesday to the Dutch Ethereum and Bitcoin meetup. As being said at the start of the show, we'll begin with a dinner at Hofje van Wijs, and at the beginning of the evening we'll walk 3 minutes to the Berlage Meet and Workspace. And there we will have to meet up, and there Jacob Boersma will also talk about this subject. So please join us. And Jacob, thank you for joining us in this show. I hope to see you this Tuesday afternoon and evening.
Thank you. I'll certainly be there.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.